You know, some stories feel more like warnings. And there's this chilling legend that comes out of Charleston, South Carolina, from way back in the spring of 1764. It's all about a woman named Jeanne. And the story goes that by the time that summer ended, the three most powerful families in the entire city, the absolute pillars of their society, were just gone, completely destroyed. So today we're going to get into that legend, a story that shows how one enslaved woman could bring down 3 whole dynasties, piece by bloody piece.
This line? This was supposedly said by a woman named Celeste Delacqua. She was peering through her opera glasses as the ship carrying Jeanne pulled into the harbor. And man, she had no idea just how right she was. That one sentence, it perfectly captures this sense of dread that came right before one of the most incredible, systematic takedowns you've ever heard of.
So let's set the scene. We're in Charleston, 1764. At this point, it is the richest port in all of the American colonies. You've got these incredible white mansions, all built on the insane profits from rice and indigo. But here's the thing. Charleston was a city built on what's been called rice and human misery. It was a place where the brutal math of the slave trade was just a fact of life, where human beings were treated like inventory and their suffering had a price tag. It was, you could say, the perfect stage for a reckoning.
And at the very top of this world were 3 men, Philippe Delacqua, Nathaniel Beaumont, and Richard Montrose. Now, they were fierce rivals, but they were without a doubt the kings of Charleston. The second they laid eyes on Jeanne at the auction block, that rivalry turned into something else entirely, a fatal obsession. They thought they were starting a game to see who could possess her, but in reality, they were just competing to see who would be ruined first.
Philippe Delacqua, well, he won that first prize. He bought Jeanne before she even officially hit the auction and brought her right into his huge mansion on East Battery. He thought he was just getting another status symbol, something to show off. Nope. What he really did was invite a slow, creeping poison into his home. And the first cracks in his family's perfect life started to show almost right away.
And see, it didn't start with anything big or violent. It just started with things being wrong. The grandfather clock in the hall started striking 13 times at midnight. Mirrors always seemed to have this thin film of dust on them, no matter how many times they were polished. You'd hear footsteps echoing in hallways that were completely empty. And while Philippe was being tormented by sleepless nights, his son Thomas developed this all-consuming, maddening obsession with Jeanne, just following her everywhere. It was a brilliant psychological attack.
And this is the moment the real story snaps into focus. A terrified Thomas Delacqua finally confronts Jeanne. He asks her, "What are you?" And this is her answer. See, this wasn't some random curse or a ghost story. This was accounting. She wasn't some evil spirit from another world. She was a debt collector. And she was there to settle an account that had been racking up interest for generations.
Jeanne's plan was just working perfectly. That obsession she'd planted in the Delacqua house, it didn't stay there. It spread like a fever through Charleston's high society. Both Nathaniel Beaumont and Richard Montrose became absolutely convinced that they had to have her. Their old rivalry turned into this public, catastrophic bidding war that was going to end up bankrupting all of them.
It all kicked off at a dinner party at the Delacquas. Nathaniel Beaumont just shattered every rule of polite society by publicly offering £20,000 for Jeanne. To put that in perspective, that was more than the entire mansion was worth.
When Philippe, of course, refused, a desperate Beaumont upped his offer to a mind-blowing £50,000 in gold, and he threw in 2 of his best ships and exclusive trade rights on top of it, a bid that would have completely crippled his own empire.
But then came Richard Montrose. He made Delacqua an offer that was just pure madness. £100,000, his ancestral plantation on James Island, and a promise to divorce his wife and abandon his children. He was willing to literally burn his entire family legacy to the ground, all for a woman he'd only seen twice. Jeanne wasn't just inspiring desire, she was weaponizing it.
Okay, so with these patriarchs driven to financial and moral ruin, the stage was officially set for the final, brutal act. And their collapse, it was shockingly fast. The precision of what came next would terrify the city of Charleston for years to come.
In less than a single week, the pillars of the city were just gone. On July 15th, Nathaniel Beaumont dies suddenly. They say his face was frozen in an expression of pure terror. 3 days later, Thomas Delacqua is locked away in an asylum.
And 2 days after that, a totally ruined and abandoned Richard Montrose vanishes, last seen just walking away from the city with absolutely nothing.
But Jeanne, she saved her biggest and most dramatic act for the very end. The family that first brought her into the city, the Delacquas, they weren't just going to fall. Oh no, they were going to be completely erased from the map of Charleston.
That very night, the Delacqua mansion just goes up in flames. Felipe and Celeste died in the fire. Investigators later concluded that Felipe probably started it himself in one last desperate act. And in all the chaos, Jeanne vanished from her third-floor room. A room, by the way, that was found locked from the inside. She was simply gone.
So, after the smoke finally cleared, and everyone realized the sheer scale of what had happened, the people of Charleston were left just trying to figure it all out. But here's the thing. This story wasn't really about a curse. It was about a debt finally being paid in full.
These are the questions the terrified survivors were asking. Was she a witch who cast some kind of spell? A demon sent from hell? Was the whole city cursed? You know, they were trying to explain something impossible, using the only language they had, but they were asking all the wrong questions.
Because from Jeanne's point of view, this had nothing to do with the supernatural at all. This was about justice. She saw herself as a human instrument, a direct consequence of a system so brutal and so dehumanizing that it could create a person capable of this kind of patient, calculated revenge. She wasn't evil. She was just balancing the scales.
And this final line, this is what turns her story from a piece of history into a timeless warning. Right before she disappeared, she supposedly told Richard Montrose that she wasn't special, that there were thousands just like her, waiting. And that final thought leaves us with a really chilling question. Was Jeanne some kind of one-off anomaly, or was she just the beginning? A reminder of the terrifying power that lies dormant, just waiting, right under the surface of any system that's built on oppression.